So notwithstanding the overall macro environment of tension, let's call it that, there are still some tailwinds that could benefit the tourism industry. And if those tailwinds stay in place in conjunction with what may or may not be a negotiated settlement to some of these tariffs and other things, that could be quite constructive.
Welcome to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods, a podcast at the nexus of hospitality, business, culture, and the mind. Now here's your host, Woolco Foods CEO, Steven Toboroff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. I am your host, Steven Toboroff. And out of all the podcasts that I've done thus far that did not involve a guest, the most recent one that I did on the tariffs has gotten the most attention from listeners, at least as measured by the number of emails and other outreach that I've received with questions and comments and, various insights. And I really appreciate that. And I've been giving some thought to one of the main dimensions of where we're at that affects the hospitality space, and that's tourism, particularly as it pertains to tourism that comes from international travelers. And there's a lot of dynamics going on with respect to tourism in the United States. So I spent some time thinking about this, writing things down, and it's definitely worthy of a podcast. So I want to go into a podcast today talking about the impact that a prolonged trade war or tariffs may have on tourism, and most importantly, strategies and ideas that would be, in my view, useful to not only deal with that challenge, but use it as an opportunity. So first and foremost, I want to begin by just emphasizing something, which is that this is not meant to be in any way, shape, or form a political podcast, this episode. This is purely an economic podcast. So whatever comments I make or observations, they are to be viewed solely through the lens of economics. I'm not here to talk politics, and everyone has their own views, but the economic challenges, I think, are somewhat, obvious or discrete. And so all of my comments should be viewed within the context of looking at this as an economic problem. So where we're at right now, and I'm recording this podcast on April 17th, is although there have been some modifications, there are global tariffs that are in place against countries around the world. And in particular, we're in what I think is appropriately characterized as a trade war with China. I was reading in the papers today that while we have a trade deficit with China with respect to goods, they have a trade deficit with us with respect to services, and that's an area that they're targeting, which is American companies in China, tourism from China to the United States, and various other economic arrangements that they have with us that are not relevant to goods. So we're in a full-blown trade war right now with the number 2 economy on the planet. And that trade war is now being fought by China in some very interesting ways that may have an impact on the hospitality space. We have global tariffs, as I said. But in addition to that, we have an environment where Europe, Canada, and Mexico, for a variety of reasons, may have an unfavorable view of the United States. The citizens of those countries, I'm sure those of you that have looked in the news have seen stories about Canadians canceling trips to America. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal regarding Canadians that own property in the United States. And there's been a number of changes made to plans by Canadians, and I would imagine the same is going on with Europe. And even something as seemingly distant from economics as Greenland can have an impact with our relationship with Denmark. And of course, there are many people from Denmark as well from other parts of Europe that come here as tourists. So there's an environment right now, whether it's something that's really as, far down the road as the trade war with China, but the overall relationship or perception of America from people who may want to come here as tourists is, I would say, not optimal. On the other hand, the dollar has weakened dramatically, and if that continues, it certainly makes it attractive to come to America and visit, and it conversely makes it financially attractive for people within the United States who, regardless of what's going on, may have been inclined to go to Europe or elsewhere to stay in the United States and visit a New York or an LA or some other major destination. But that's kind of where we are right now. Now, where our business is located, which is in the New York City metro area, and I'm going to talk about that, but this same would apply to really any business in the hospitality space in America and certainly in the cities. New York City is an idiosyncratic destination because it's very much impacted, or at least segments of the hospitality space, because not all of them. New York's a big city. There's millions of people who live here. There's millions of people who live around New York that enjoy living in New York and doing things in New York. But nonetheless, I would argue that New York City is certainly disproportionately impacted by tourism relative to almost any other city in America. And it's also disproportionately impacted by the financial services sector. So right now, we have a situation, as I just said, the weaker dollar. I remember back in the 90s when the dollar really weakened to the euro, which I have no reason to believe is going to be the case, but certainly is conceivable. You had people taking trips from all over Europe to come to America to go shopping because the dollar was at $1, I think 60 or something to the euro. So the weak dollar is a benefit and may have an impact, could move the needle. We'll have to see on that, but it's certainly not a headwind. And the other thing, as I mentioned before, is, there's a lot that's going on internationally. And to the extent that people who are within the United States also have views where they want to stay close to home, it's not unlikely that they'll go to places such as New York, the Jersey Shore, and all of that. And then the final thing that's happening in New York, and I'm getting this anecdotally from a lot of different people, is that the price of hotel rooms has come down dramatically. Now, part of that may be a reflection with respect to immigration policies, which have opened up hotel rooms. Part of it may be due to a lack of tourists coming in. But suffice it to say that from what I've been hearing, and I haven't done any formal research, so if I'm off base here, I'd love for people to share information to the contrary. But from a number of business travelers that I've spoken with, the rates have come down dramatically. And that is also beneficial to tourism. People are going to come to New York and they're checking hotel rates, and maybe they looked at it a year ago and they see hotel prices coming down 30 to 40%. That would certainly incentivize people to come here. So notwithstanding the overall macro environment of tension, let's call it that, there are still some tailwinds that could benefit the tourism industry. And if those tailwinds stay in place in conjunction with what may or may not be a negotiated settlement to some of these tariffs and other things, that could be quite constructive. So that's sort of the lay of the land. And the question then becomes, okay, let's say that I'm a restaurant or a bar in New York City, and an appreciable amount of my business is from tourism, whether that's tourists from Europe, whether that's tourists from Asia. My business certainly is impacted by tourists for the better or for the worse. Well, what should I do? What's the approach here? What are the ways of looking at it? So the first thing that I would say is discipline yourself to focus on what you can control. In any situation, and certainly a situation like this, there's lots of things that can be very frustrating and very disturbing, very agitating that you can't control. You may disagree with policies, you may be angry about them, all that stuff. But it's important to identify and really get in your mind what you cannot control and stop focusing on it. Because once you do that and you discipline yourself to focus on what you can control, and there's a lot here that you can control, you're going to be effective. But if you never make that first clear and decisive break and say, I like to write things down, so you can get a piece of paper and ask yourself the question, what is within my power to do to positively impact sales with respect to my tourist visitors, people who come here from other parts of the world and are under the category of tourism? Get your mind completely focused and your energy focused on those things that you can control and completely disregard what you can't. One of the things that you can immediately do is the city of New York has a lot of resources for businesses, particularly businesses that have tourist components to them or like to reach out to tourists. So you can absolutely reach out to the city and any other entities that you're in alignment with that are reaching out to the communities that you want to get customers from. So, for example, if you have a particular type of bar that gets a lot of tourists from, say, Ireland, in addition to reaching out to New York City, There are many organizations that are run by Irish Americans that reach out to Ireland. Align yourself with them. Maybe there's a way to position yourself on their website. Maybe there's a way to get a shout out from their social media. But you want to start actively thinking about ways to reach out directly to the consumers that you want to reach. One of the things that I've been noticing a lot on Instagram and other social media, which I've found quite inspiring, is over the past couple of days, I've seen a lot in my Instagram feed of factory owners and other business owners from China reaching out directly to the American consumer and other ones, sort of bypassing the middlemen that they were involved with. But a very, aggressive, friendly, engaged, energetic outreach. There's nothing to stop you from doing that in your business. So in addition to aligning yourself with New York City or organizations that are reaching out to your market, there's nothing to stop you. And in fact, everything that is within your power to craft and consistently put forth a welcoming message tailored to your desired customers. So if you're a restaurant that gets a lot of tourists from Japan or from Italy, whatever the case may be, I would absolutely recommend crafting and executing on a daily message through every social media platform that's relevant, a very welcoming message to your customers, telling them that you're here, telling them you're looking forward to seeing them, sharing with them the exciting stuff, reinforcing that bond, because whatever's happening at the macro level, the nation state level, if you will, people are still people. And if you've had customers that come to New York every year and one of their traditions is to have brunch at your restaurant or to have cocktails at your bar, to spend a night in your hotel, whatever the case may be, those are traditions that are very important to the people. And I think getting that personal outreach, this is the hospitality industry, that personal outreach, that personal, how shall we say, message, crafted and tailored in a way to really engage with people that have been coming there for a long time, I think that's going to absolutely resonate. And I think it's something that you should absolutely do and do it consistently, do it on a daily basis. The other thing which I would suggest doing within a similar vein is, in addition to putting stuff on your social media, start DMing. If you have email lists and social media lists of former clients, and most places don't, but if you do, absolutely use that to craft a message. But also reach out to entities, let's say in Italy or in Japan or places over there where you know that those citizens will be looking before they make a tourist trip. Craft a welcoming message. Get yourself on the radar of those entities in those home countries so that if anyone ever reaches out to them or looks things up within their social media or their digital profile, that they will see, hey, this restaurant, this bar, this hotel has made a number of outreaches. They really love our business. They really love our customers. Everything that you can do to get yourself on that radar would be great. And absolutely do not neglect to look out for American tourists as well, because as I just said, this could be one of those years, I've seen them before, where American tourists forsake going overseas and decide to spend that time in New York because perhaps hotel rooms are more affordable, or people don't want to leave the country, or they don't want to have to spend more because the dollar's gotten so weak. So if you've never been a restaurant that has targeted the American tourist outside of your city, I'm going to keep this focused in New York because that's our market, but this would be applicable anywhere. Reach out to chambers of commerce and other entities in various states or various cities or various counties where you think your establishment would do well. Send a great message there. There's lots of videos that I would recommend people watch, particularly in the hospitality space, YouTube videos that'll show you how to really get the most out of Instagram. In my opinion, the two most important platforms for the hospitality space, at least in New York, are TikTok and Instagram. I don't know which is more impactful, but the one I'm more familiar with is Instagram, and there's lots of very powerful tools you can do. So definitely put in the time to not only reach out to the American consumer, but to do so in the most impactful way possible. And the way you'll do that is by educating yourself how to use these social media platforms because they're excellent. The next thing to focus on, which is totally within your control, is really identify your core strengths and stay authentic to them. So the first thing that you want to really try to identify is, in your business, What is it that makes your restaurant spectacular? What are the core elements that you think make you stand out, that make you worthwhile? Forget about anything else for a moment. Identify those core strengths and stay true to them and be authentic with respect to them. One of the things I don't like is when businesses sort of panic and they start throwing everything but the kitchen sink at a problem, and they totally water down the very essence of what makes them great. So if your core strength is your outdoor beer garden and your selection of beers, don't change that. If your core strength is some aspect of your dessert menu or some aspect of your service, whatever it is, you need to identify it and continue to refine it and lead into it. The second thing that I would suggest doing, and this is marketing, is promote specials for new or first-time customers. You want to get people in the door, and this is not just limited to tourists. Now, let's say you're a business and only 20 or 25% of your business in a given month or in a given chunk of time is from tourists, and you want to make that up. I think now's a great time to be promotional and offer people an incentive to come into your restaurant. For first time, again, some of this can be done beforehand through proper marketing. Some of it can be done if you're in your restaurant or you have a really well-trained staff and you notice someone's there for the first time and your host starts speaking to them and you realize they're from the neighborhood or they work across the street. I think it's always a worthwhile investment to maybe buy them a drink, offer them a dessert to share, some financial incentive and acknowledgement to first-time customers, because you're going to want these people coming back, and you're going to want to try to get people in the door to offset what, may be a slight diminution in business from international tourists. Take a creative look at your neighborhood and possibly reposition yourself. What do I mean by that? If you're in a neighborhood that has a number of offices that are starting to get filled up again, or if you're in a neighborhood that has some art galleries, and you've never offered a catering alternative before, or you've never offered promotions to businesses to come to your place because you've never thought of doing it, take a very creative, fresh-eyed look at your business with respect to the neighborhood you're in, the vicinity you're in, and see if there aren't opportunities right in front of you that you could capitalize on that for whatever reason you've never pursued before. And by all means, if that involves speaking with other people, talking to friends, talking to your staff, talking to other people in the business, it's always great to get a fresh perspective. And whenever I do this with my business, I'm always shocked at the number of opportunities that are right in front of me that I never thought of before or never pursued before because it never really came across my mind. So absolutely take a fresh look at things, be creative, understand your neighborhood, understand the opportunities, and reposition your business to capitalize on them right now. And of course, you need to have, and this would be the final under this section, have an open and positive mind and ask a lot of questions. So whenever the news is bleak or depressing, whenever there's information out there, again, that we can't control, if we're not mindful of what's going on, it can infect and affect our thinking to the negative, and we don't want that. And the best way to avoid that is to first and foremost stay positive. And the way you stay positive is asking positive questions. So every day, just condition yourself, discipline yourself to ask some positive, constructive questions about your business. Where are there opportunities within 10 blocks of my business that I could get customers that I'm not? Who can I reach out to today in the governments of France and Belgium to see if people would come, or governments, tourism agencies, hotels? What actions can I take on social media? Who do I know that could refer customers to me that's overseas right now when they come in? Who do I know locally in my neighborhood that would be a phenomenal ambassador for my restaurant to tell everyone in their building or everyone in their office to come here? Our brains are incredible instruments. It will answer the questions that we ask it. And if you get in the habit of asking yourself positive, constructive questions and let your brain go to work on it and write down the answers, and then most importantly, take action on those answers, you'll be surprised at how much success you're going to have. It's just a matter of reconditioning the mind and perspective. it's very important at this time to remind oneself of something else, which is that optimally, business is a long game. What do I mean by that? Whatever the temporal challenge is right now, vis-a-vis trade wars, tariffs, the dollar, tourism, you name it, these things go in cycles and they change. And so what you don't want to do is make drastic changes that dramatically change your business only to accommodate this cycle and leave yourself vulnerable to not succeeding on the next one and the next one. You have to take a long-term approach to business optimally and understand that the decisions that you make now, for better or for worse, can reverberate into the future. So if you were to just make a decision right now to go all in on international tourists and really make that the whole focus of what you do, and lose sight of your regular customers if you have them, or lose sight of your corporate customers, or lose sight of domestic tourists, well, when things change and there's a real opportunity because there's a renaissance in New York and Americans are coming, or there's a major change in your neighborhood, the decisions you've made now to accommodate the instant sort of challenge, if you will, are going to reverberate into the future. You don't want to put yourself in that position. You want to think longer term. I also think it's a great time to use times like this to do a deep dive into your business. You know, one of the things that I find for myself, and I find this with a lot of business owners, is I love so many of the day-to-day elements of the operation of this business, whether it's meeting with the sales team, accounts receivable, meetings, purchasing, whatever, and you can really lose yourself in those processes. But it is imperative that you take a 6,000 square foot view of your business as well. Whether you're the owner, whether you're a manager, whether you're someone who's working within an organization but looking to perhaps start your own business, it's important to get into the habit again, get comfortable with taking a deep dive into what you're doing and looking at it analytically. And sometimes these exogenous challenges and shocks present the perfect opportunity to do that. So now might be a great time to really spend 1 week doing a deep dive and looking at your menu. What's working, what isn't? What have you been doing with respect to your menu just out of habit, but it doesn't make sense? Then do the same thing with how your service team handles things. Do the same thing with your relationships with your vendors. When's the last time you had a meeting with your core vendors, shared with them what's going on, made demands of them to accommodate you? So use this as a chance to take a step back and do a deep dive. And then the final thing, which I think is really helpful and really important, particularly now, is reach out to other hospitality businesses in your market. So in New York City, if you're a bakery in Hell's Kitchen, reach out to bakeries in the West Village and on the Upper East Side. Introduce yourself. See if you can compare notes. You know, in business, people are very often focused on the competitive aspects of business, and business, most assuredly, is a competitive sport, you know, as it were. But it's also a sport where meaningful conversations with people who are in the same circumstances you are can be incredibly helpful. And perspective can be very helpful. And so you might be that bar in Soho that depends on tourists, and you call a bar on the Upper East Side near the hotels, and they might have some strategies that you hadn't thought of, and you might have some strategies for them. And so you can build that sort of, I don't want to say community, but you can build that relationship with others who are in the same boat you're in, facing similar challenges, and get the benefit of other people's perspective. And this is extraordinarily valuable. So the point is this, you know, whatever is going on outside of our control, we have to adapt to it. But if we begin by making the adaptive process contextualized within a positive question, how can I turn what's going on into a positive opportunity for my business? Where are there opportunities right now that are available to me that I haven't pursued? Most people don't do this. Most people will spend 80% of their days complaining about things that are out of their control and arguing about them and debating them and proving them. And they may very well be right. But it's time spent on something that has absolutely nothing to do with what I think we really are most interested in, which is maximizing the success of our business and maximizing our enjoyment of life. So it's good to be aware of things. I'm a big believer in, reading and being aware of what's going on and being a critical thinker. But it's much more important to take action with respect to our businesses. And the actions that we take have to be as focused and as constructive and as impactful as possible. And we do that by contextualizing things with the appropriate questions. So I wanted to do this podcast. I'm glad that I did. I really enjoyed the comments and emails that I received on my earlier one. So please, I really read every single one of them and I enjoy them. So you can always reach me on Instagram at Woolco Foods. That's our Instagram. Or you can email me at steven@woolcofoods.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, as always, please give it a positive review. Please follow, share it with people that you think would derive value from it. We're really getting a tremendous amount of increase in listeners, and I know it's all organically, and it's because people are recommending the podcast, and I greatly appreciate it. And I greatly appreciate the input and questions and observations. This is a collaborative journey that we're going on together, and I appreciate all of you taking the time to listen, and especially taking the time to write me and share your thoughts. And so with that, I just want everybody to have an awesome, awesome day.
Thank you for listening to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. Please be sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. And to learn more about Woolco Foods or Steven Toboroff, please visit us at woolcofoods.net.